As soon as everybody comes in, that's when we start organizing it. You're welcome to have a seat.
Would everyone please be seated? I would like to welcome everyone to the services for Garrett today. As a family, we have appreciated all the outpouring of love that we have seen from his family and friends. And it's fun as a mother to see all the friends that he had that I didn't even know about. So we appreciate all of you. The generosity of those who are helping to offset all of the costs, those who have donated to the luncheon, the beautiful flowers that he had. The casket will be carried to the cemetery on the back of a flatbed truck with a truck procession. Make sure you take notice of that. Thanks to all of those who arranged for that tribute to happen. There's also a truck parade scheduled for tomorrow, and I think Mike will tell about that a little bit. We appreciate Walker Funeral Home. You have made this process a little less painful. Also a reminder, there will be a luncheon after the cemetery for family and friends. It will be at Holly's house in Salem. It's on 3rd West. And if you don't know where, you can follow someone from there. There may be a detour. Salem is torn up right now. I'd especially like to thank my children and my grandchildren and all the effort that they have put forth and their willingness to do whatever it took to put everything together. It was such a shock to everyone. I think most of us are still in disbelief, and I've decided it will be okay if I don't breathe until next week. So it's been amazing to see all the lives that Garrett has touched. I'm his mother. I decided since I was the one that brought him into the world and I was the one who tried to direct his life, which didn't happen. I would like to be the one to honor him by conducting his funeral today. For the benefit of those who are tuning in on YouTube, I would like to announce the program as follows. The family prayer was just offered by David Barnett, who is a good friend. The prelude and postlude music is being played by Denise Porter, his aunt. The invocation will be offered by Clell Augustin, another aunt. Following the prayer, we will hear comments of his friends read by Garrett's son Tyson, and then thoughts of Dad by his daughter Kelsey. The song Fathers and Daughters by Michael Bolton will then be played. I want you to listen to the words of this song. It's the way that fathers think about not only their daughters, but their sons too. We'll go to that point.
Our kind Father in heaven, we come before thee to honor the life of Garrett Hansen. We're so grateful for the 51 years that we had with him. We're grateful for those that have decided to help with this program. Please bless them, that their hearts and minds will be open, that they will be able to say what they would like to say. At this time, we ask thee that thy Spirit might be with us and continue to keep us safe, and especially for those who have traveled far away. Again, we're grateful for Garrett and his life. We do this humbly, Father. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
All right. Only ever given one talk ever, and I almost passed out doing it, so I'm gonna try and not do that this time. So just wanted to get up and share some memories that I've heard from his close friends and family, and then just a couple things that I want to say. So appreciate everyone showing up and all that. So this one is from a childhood friend of his, Marianne. So I'm just going to read a little bit of this. She says, first, Garrett was an amazing friend to everyone and a best friend to many of us. His gigantic laugh, smile, and bright blue eyes made all of us laugh, and his passing has made each one of us cry. Memories of horseback riding at Tucker when the Barnum and Bailey train passed, just like the cartoon, people waving out the window, giraffes, elephants, tigers, we wish. We laughed, waved, and could not believe it was real. Racing the red Pinto Sport and the Mazda down Zero Street. It's Woodland Hills Drive now. The brown Ford he bought from Uncle Festus. The best fight in sophomore hall. Yes, I had a front row seat cheering him on. He kicked butt, and he was grounded from it. Countless ball games, both playing and watching. Number 13 was his favorite number, and everyone called him Pep or Pepper. Country dancing every Friday and Saturday at the Armory with Blake, Garrett, Kyle, Devin, and Troy. Garrett loved cooking breakfast. I've never been able to recreate his rice and pork chops. This is from Troy, who's just a lifelong friend. So around 1996, Pepper and I were playing softball 3 nights a week and almost every weekend. We played for Security Insurance, Neil's Auto, and Overman Concrete. 2 nights in Spanish Fork and 1 in Orem at Windsor Park. One particular night in Orem at Windsor Park, with it getting ready for a tournament in Park City, the one they played in every year. They had a game at 8:30 and 9:30. We played 8:30, and yes, we won. And 9:30 game, and the 9:30 game was the other team didn't show, so they decided to take batting practice to get prepared for the tournament. Now I have to explain Windsor Park. The fences were about 280 feet to the corners, but in left field there was a 50 feet high, non-exaggeration, wall. Just beyond the fence was a row of houses towards the end of workups. Pep told me he was going for the house After all, he had tagged the fence almost every time before that. Well, sure enough, next at bat, Garrett hit the ball so dang hard, up and over that 50-foot monster, right through the kitchen window. I've never seen a family clear out of the house so fast. And then Greg, another family friend, had shared, once when playing the card game Pinochle, Garrett and I were partners playing a 6-handed game of boys versus girls. Garrett bid for the hand in spades, and I had a bunch of clubs, and mistaking spades for clubs gave Garrett all my cards with clubs. Garrett was very confused and said, "What are you doing?" But despite this, he laughed and he didn't let it ruin the game. He still made it work and won the hand. When camping, Garrett cooked a large breakfast feast for everyone, and when we were eating pancakes, I broke my plastic fork and flipped my plate full of Garrett's glorious breakfast all over everywhere. Garrett didn't get mad or yell. He just laughed and made fun of me for years, especially when I would eat anything with a plastic fork. His laugh is contagious and always made people feel better. And this is just my thought. Just seeing so many people here to say goodbye to my dad today just shows how loved he was and the impact he made. I still can't believe the amount of contact I've gotten from old family friends to his close personal friends and people I've never met before. I guess I never really understood the type of impact he really did have on those people he was surrounded with in his life. My dad wasn't the best at expressing his feelings, but you always knew he cared so deeply for his family and friends. I remember when I was younger, he wanted me to play baseball more than anything. I didn't love baseball because I was a little scared of the ball, but I remember my dad always being mad I didn't want to play because he loved it so much when he was a kid. But he always stood by my side and supported me in what I wanted to do. I remember one time in Little League football, which was my favorite sport, which was the sport I loved most. I had this one play where I juked a bunch of guys out, weaving through the entire defenses, and ended up taking it to the end zone. And I just remember him screaming, "That's my boy, that's my boy." That's just like one of my favorite memories with him. I love making my dad proud, and I'll miss the times we shared together, the jokes and the sports banter about our favorite teams, especially him being a BYU fan, which is still sad. I think one thing I loved most about my dad is we could go a month or so without talking, but when he would come see me when he was getting his truck cleaned, we would talk like no time had passed at all. I would give him small updates on my life and any sports stories I thought he would care about. He always had time to listen and would let me brag about my teams being better than his, especially Utah. I'll miss his funny texts and phone calls and telling him my stats after all my softball games, or setting up the times to go fishing or coming over after he had smoked some ribs or steak. Thanks for the memories, Dad. I'll see you again someday.
Oops. Bear with me. One of my favorite memories growing up was when my dad would ask us to go to work with him during the summer. He was a single father for a very long time, and he really did everything he could to take care of me and Tyson. I remember when he worked for Geneva Rock, Tyson and I would be sitting at the bottom of his feet in the cement truck while he worked overnight. When he worked for Waste Management, driving the garbage truck, we would have to get up so early to be taken to Aunt Jill's house so he could work. He was a hardworking man and always did everything he could to take care of us the best way that he knew how. He played softball multiple times a week, and watching him play made me want to play and hit the ball just as hard as he did. Almost every time he was up to bat, it was long gone over that fence and onto Timbuktu. He always was so hard on me when I wanted to play ball. He sure didn't let me be lazy about it. He tried to teach me to pitch, but I didn't quite get there, so I played shortstop instead. Almost every weekend, we would go for rides up the canyon and look for elk or deer and just ride and ride for hours, listening to music, belting out the lyrics. Tyson hated that. One time I had problems at home and tried to run away. When he picked me up, we went for a really long ride up the canyon. One thing he said to me that I have always held close to my heart. He said, "There's one thing I always want you to remember, Kelsey. You will always be my little girl. No one will ever take that away from you." That's something I've had to frequently remind myself of over the last 13 years. Over those years, our relationship has been pretty rocky and not there, really. I myself have been very sick and things have gotten pretty scary, but I will forever cherish the Thursday before his accident. on Friday. He came to see me in the hospital after he realized how bad I really was and spent hours with me, all while he was still working. And I just want to reiterate how much he invested himself in his work. He still made time for me, though. I begged him to get me Subway, even though the doctors were telling me the type of food I need to be eating was not that. He got up and was getting ready to leave, and I asked again for Subway, going against orders, and he got it for me. He brought it back to me and told me that he loved me as he walked out, something he hasn't said for years. He then talked to my Uncle Todd about needing to bring me home to take care of me. He texted me multiple times in a row at midnight that night, checking on me, worried about me. I woke up at 3 a.m. and texted him back and told him I was okay and asked if he was okay. I never heard back from him, and at that point, I knew something had happened. That time with my dad was something I will always remember and hold close to my heart. In my eyes, our relationship was rekindled, something that has needed to happen for many years. I think that he would only feel the same. I feel cheated of our newly rekindled relationship with anticipation of how it could have turned out. But I know the universe works in mysterious ways, and this was definitely something the universe made happen for a reason. My 2 boys, his grandsons, Gabriel and Mackay, will miss out on such a fun and loving grandpa. But they will always be protected by my mom and dad as their guardian angels. And I will continue to love them just the way my parents would have. We love you and will miss you so much.
Make your every wish come true. Every dream for your life. That's not how the story goes. The world is full of hurt. There's a promise and a road. No one did understand. I know you miss the road. I'll be there in your heart, and you'll carry on. Moonlight on the water, sunlight in the sky. Fathers and daughters never say goodbye. Baby, I don't read the same. Baby, one thing wrong. Learn to love is where your wings and fly away before you're home. When time comes, I know you'll miss the road. I'll be there in your heart, and you'll carry on. Like moonlight on the water, and sunlight in the sky. Fathers and daughters never say goodbye. never seen the light. Never seen
We'll now have Dallas Hansen talk about his big brother, and then Mike Frost, the boss, will share memories of working with him. And then we'll have the song Save the Roses by Lee Brice. That's for all of his friends. Listen carefully to it.
Garrett will truly be missed. The last several times that I spoke with Garrett were special to me. I remember in March we were in Provo for a dance competition for Jossie, and we decided to go visit, see if we could find Todd at the 7-Eleven. So we went to Provo, and Todd wasn't there. So we're like, oh, I'll just go visit him in his house in Springville. And when we got there, for no reason really at all, we just decided to pull into the 7-Eleven in Springville. And lo and behold, we go in and Garrett's standing there. And so Ashley and I sat and chatted with him for, 30 minutes or so. And we got to just kind of catch up. And it was just nice because me living where I lived, you never really get to see him too much. And so anyway, that happened. And then the next time that we saw him was at Mom's house for Mother's Day, which was really special because she only invited her own kids and she didn't invite any of the other people. So what ended up happening is it was just a really intimate kind of gathering, kind of like what you had in childhood with your siblings. And it was pretty unusual, but I think it was well thought out, and it turned out to be just a really great experience to be able to spend that time together. And, you don't know what's coming, but it's good to look back, I think, and see how that worked out for us. I'll never forget that day. We just kind of looked at photos and had dinner, and it was great. Anyway, the next time that I talked to Garrett was on Father's Day. He sent a mass text, I guess, to everybody and reached out to everybody. It wasn't a mass text, but it was just a personal message to all the dads. And I just think that really showed a lot about kind of where he was and reaching out to others and trying to kindle relationships and being a shoulder to cry on. And that just felt really special to me because I don't think, many people are really thinking about it too much. And I just felt really seen that day. And that was important to me. Again, just random, or, maybe that was Garrett reaching out to us. But Friday, I heard about Garrett's fall, and I was out of town, but I thought about him the entire day. And that night when I went to bed, I had a dream, and in the dream I visited with Garrett, and I just went in the room, and he was sitting in a lazy boy chair, and I sat down next to him, and we just sat and talked like old brothers do. And it's kind of an interesting experience because when I woke up, I just felt overwhelmed with peace. And I knew that he was gone at that point, and I knew that everything was okay, but it just, I don't know, it's difficult for me to get back to that place of peace, but I know that I think about it a lot and that I can go back to that. And that was special to me as well. Another thing that happened was yesterday, as Ashley was getting ready, which I didn't really know that everybody had already heard this or not, but a 3-year-old song just happened to come onto the Spotify algorithm, and it was Save the Roses. And we listen to Lee Brice all the time and are always listening to that kind of music, and had never heard that song. And it just felt like Garrett. I mean, I didn't listen to the whole song yet, but the first half for sure, it's like he's just speaking right to you. And I mean, there's no ignoring that. But yeah, now whether it's coincidence or random or well thought out, or whether you decide to pick up a photo album or play a specific song, it doesn't matter how you choose to carry Garrett with you or how you try to see the things. I know that Garrett, making decisions in life, he spent a lot of time thinking about what Gary would do and how, that would affect him. And I think that that's a good thing that a lot of us can carry on with us, is, you know, especially for Xander and Kelsey and Tyson and, you know, the people that were with Garrett every day. My condolences go out to you the most. I think you have the biggest holes to fill, and that's going to be tough. And I'm sorry for you guys. The one thing though is, you know, I believe that this life is not all that we have. The old souls here today can attest that this life experience will be over all too soon, and we'll be on to the next one. Garrett's still here with us, and we will be with him again. Thank you for coming in. God bless you all.
Good morning, everyone. If you don't know who I am, my name is Mike Frost, in the program listed as the boss, although we all knew Garrett was really the boss. It's just a blessing to be able to come and speak here today at his funeral. I've known Garrett for almost 20 years and got so many memories that I'll cherish for a long time. Be able to speak. I wasn't with him daily like some of the people that he worked with. Just with his role, he dealt with a lot of people daily, and because he was so good at his role, sometimes him and I could go several days or even a week without speaking. And so I'll just say before I get into it that last night I was completely blessed by just being able to talk to some of the drivers that Garrett just had, you know, daily relationship with, and I was completely just to hear the stories that they would tell of Garrett, and I chose a couple to share with you today. So I met Garrett around 2004 when he came to work for a previous company that I had called Connex. He was hired, and for as long as I can remember in the working world, we called him G-Rat as a nickname. I quickly learned about his personality. One day he'd pull into the yard and park his green Ford. I don't know if you guys remember that four-door green Ford Super Duty he had, and get in his dump truck and go. And one day I thought I'd be funny, and I went out to the back of that truck and I put a Connex logo on the back sticker without his permission. It was his personal truck, and I thought, man, this is going to get a rise out of him. Later that day when he came to the yard, I was looking out the window of the office waiting to see, and he got in his truck and left. And I thought, man, he must have not noticed. So tomorrow he'll notice sometime tonight, and I'll get that reaction I'm looking for tomorrow. And it was like a week or more before I finally talked to Garrett about it. He never said anything. I was like, hey, I was trying to put that sticker on your truck kind of just as a joke. I was trying to get a reaction out of you. And he just did that Garrett laugh. Didn't even say, you idiot, or, I like it. Nothing, just kind of a laugh, and was on. And man, that sticker was on his truck long after he even worked for Connex. I'd see him drive around Springville with that green truck and now faded Connex sticker. Garrett had an excellent sense of humor, and he laughed with all that he had. And at least my experience with him is he could not be embarrassed. He was a hard guy to get a reaction out of. There were times I'd go to the yard and his truck would be there, and I'd slide his seat all the way forward, and just to picture in my head this big guy crawling up to the top seat and not being able to fit in, and thinking that'd for sure do it. But nope, never called, never complained, never really got a reaction. Last night I met a friend of Garrett's and previous employer, Ron, and I loved hearing the stories that Ron told about Garrett. There were too many to tell, but you could tell that Ron and Garrett were like people. One of the stories was when they were working in North Dakota, and the supervisor would call Garrett, someone that I got the impression Garrett definitely didn't know what. He said, hey, what are you doing? Of course, Garrett didn't use the words, but for the sake of the audience and the kids, Garrett would say, I'm taking a dump. And over and over and over, and this guy would call, hey, what are you doing, Garrett? I'm taking a dump. So finally he called Ron and said, "Hey, what's up with Garrett? He's always in the bathroom." And I was like, "Man, he's messing with you. That's just who Garrett is." And then another time, and I'm not clear on if it was the same supervisor, but they were in North Dakota, and they all were standing there, and the supervisor walked up and kind of called Garrett out and said, "Garrett, you don't really like me much, do you?" And I guess Garrett looked at him straight in the eyes and said, "Nope." He turned around and walked away. During the Arise years, these past 7 or 8 years, I did find one thing that would get Garrett riled up a little bit and get a reaction out of him, and that was a CDL driver that didn't know how to drive a truck. Somebody that wasn't a real driver. There were times we'd post jobs and we'd go through the applicants, and Garrett would schedule, test drives with them, and he'd call me with one of two reports, either a bad report, and it would go something like, "That guy couldn't even move the truck. He must have ran 42 stop signs, 3 red lights, and I can't even believe I'm alive still." Something very dramatic like that. And I'd be like, "Oh, Garrett, well, where'd you take him?" "Just around the block. Once I knew he couldn't drive, I had him turning it around." And so I'm doing the math on how'd they get around the block if the guy can't move the truck, and 42 stop signs is probably an exaggeration. Or the good report, when a guy could drive, often went like this. He'd call me and he'd say, "This guy can actually drive. He's a decent driver." And he'd, give me the report on why he thinks we should give him a shot. And most times I would say, "So Garrett," just ask him a follow-up question. "So Garrett, can he drive as good as I can?" And he'd always answer, "Oh, hell no, not even close." And it's a little funnier if you know that I'm not much of a driver. I can function as a CDL driver, but I don't have the tens of thousand hours that some of you guys have. And he would always follow up and by saying, "You are the man." And Garrett and I had this thing going over the years where, I would say, No, Garrett, I insist. You're the man." And he'd reply back something like, "No, humbly, you are the man." And the last text I got Thursday was him telling me that I am the man. We were talking about Kelsey, and he was very worried. And I said, "Do whatever you need to do." And I asked her name so that I could pray for her by name. And he said, "You are the man," and said her name's Kelsey. And that's the last thing he said to me. So, we had that going back and forth. And this week I've been thinking, man, that's the last text I got. He won this battle. I'm never going to be able to say that again. And then last night at the viewing, somebody handed me the captain's hat and said, "Here, sign this." I was like, "I don't even know what to sign." "Oh, yes, I do." So I wrote, "You're the man." So I win. I remember playing softball with the Connex company team. He never missed games and he never missed the ball. I remember him being a phenomenal first baseman and a great hitter, just like many of the stories. Later in the Arise days, we played on a softball team together with Tyson and some of his friends. And I remember pulling into the ballpark here in Spanish Fork and seeing the dump truck parked there. He loved it so much that even after a long, hard day's work, he'd just go straight there. Janet mentioned this week that she would be conducting, and she said that it's going to kind of be a non-traditional because I'll be conducting. And I thought, well, that's perfect for Garrett because he was definitely a non-traditional guy. It's not traditional that you would wear shorts and work boots in the middle of the wintertime, but Garrett did that. I don't think it's traditional for a seasoned truck driver to paint his nails on a regular basis. And it's definitely not traditional for a funeral procession to be taking the guy in a semi-truck. So it's been a great service, as untraditional as it might be. That was Garrett. And I'll really miss his, for lack of better words, Garrett-ness. He had this Garrett-ness about him that just made him who he was. And love it or hate it, Garrett was going to be exactly who he was, and he wasn't changing for anybody, but he was genuine about it. This week, as I thought of what to say, one of the things that I was reminded and really grateful about our relationship was that our relationship was just fine with Garrett being Garrett and me being me. Neither one of us expected anything but just true, genuine reaction, interactions out of us, just genuine people. And I'm very grateful to Garrett about that. I knew I could just be him. He was a very impactful man. He left a lasting impression on so many that he knew and worked with. And I know that Garrett was a rock for many, and he was stable ground for many. He was a father. As a provider, he brought stability as a son, as a friend, as a sibling, as a brother, and especially for us at Arise, he was such a rock. He brought so much stability. He was a leader, and he was the man. His loss leaves a huge hole in all of our hearts and definitely a sense of instability. We'll get it together, but he has big shoes to fill. Garrett offered a lot of earthly stability through his relationships, and back to just Garrett being allowing me to be me. I hope you don't mind. I just want to close with a verse and a couple thoughts to encourage you, because Garrett allowed me to be me. We had lots of spiritual talks over the years, those hour-plus phone conversations talking about, just different spiritual topics. Garrett was somebody that could come to me when he, needed some advice in life, and I knew that I could go to him and he could be a listening ear. So with this verse, Matthew 7:24-7, what I want to communicate is, for a topic, I guess, finding eternal stability in the midst of earthly instability. Matthew 7:24 reads like this: Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell with a great crash. So the analogy of this verse is a wise builder who built his house on stable ground, a rock, compared to a foolish builder who built his house on sand or unstable ground. The application for us in this verse, if we just take a second and break it apart, is the builder can relate to any single one of us. Every one of us, we're all finite, imperfect human beings. We have decisions to make in life, and we all have things the one thing we definitely all have in common, as do we have in common with Garrett, is that one day we'll be here where Garrett is today. We'll be met with death. The house in the verse is referring to our lives, our physical lives, but specifically our spiritual lives. So I would ask, what is the foundation of your soul built on? Is it stable or is it unstable? And although we can and should find stability in our relationships with others, ultimate and eternal stability can only be found in Jesus Christ, who is the rock in the verse mentioned, or the rock mentioned in the verse. Jesus Christ is the rock. John 14:6 in the Bible says, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. The only way. It doesn't give room for lots of other ways. Jesus says, I am the way. And then the storm in the verse, when it talks about the rains coming down and the winds blowing, it's talking about the storms in life. And death of a loved one in this life, I can't think of much that offers more instability, more storms in life than especially unexpectedly losing someone we love. So we find ourselves in this storm. We're brought here today by Garrett's death, a fate that awaits us all, a fate caused by sin. And I want to be very clear. Garrett didn't die Friday or this past week. I don't know the exact time, but because he sinned, like he didn't sin and then die. But universally speaking, when sin entered the world, so did death. The Bible says that for the wages of sin is death. I'm sure we all understand what a wage is. It's something that we've earned. And so breaking that down, it says what we've earned for our sin is death. Physically, which brings us here today, something none of us will escape, and also spiritually. Garrett has physically died. There's a separation from physical life. He's no longer here with us. And spiritually is very similar, where we're spiritually separated from spiritual life, who is God. So this presents the greatest storm life can offer. And our lives must be built on the rock of Jesus Christ so that our lives don't fall with the great crash. Speaking of the great crash in that verse, it's a reality that each one will one day stand before the judgment seat of God. And although that day will come, until it does, God has chosen to be patient and loving and respond in love. We build the foundation of our lives on Christ through God's love. And very familiar verse, especially as a sports fan. There's lots of people holding it up at sports games. John 3:16 says, God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that whoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. God so loved the world. And it's speaking of, when it uses the word world, it's speaking of what Christ did on the cross, his sufficiency, meaning it's good enough for everyone in the world. But when we go later in the verse to whoever believes, it brings it to a more personal level, meaning that there's a personal choice in actually believing. So when it says God so loved the world, it means that God so loved us, each one of you, so personally that he did this. He gave Jesus, who was sinless and undeserving of death. The only one that wasn't deserving of death, the only one righteous. Think of it as being bankrupt. As sinners, we're kind of spiritually bankrupt. Jesus was not bankrupt. He was the only one that could afford to make this righteous payment. And he did that. It says believes. Whoever believes in him, this is simply receiving God's gift through the hands of faith. It's trusting in God. It's not just it's not some intellectual knowledge that God exists and this man 2,000 years ago died on the cross. It's a trust with all of your weight. I look around and some have your arms folded and some has your hands in your laps, and you're sitting in these chairs, putting your full weight and trust in those chairs. I don't see anybody with their hands out, kind of waiting to brace themselves in case that chair breaks. You've all placed your full weight in that chair, and that's exactly what God asks us to do through trusting what Jesus did on the cross for us. Ephesians 2:8-9 puts it like this, and I'm almost done. God saves you by his grace when you believe, and you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Salvation or forgiveness is not a reward for the good things we've done, so no one can boast, but it does bring a changed life. The verses before this, I'm not going to get into that. I know I'm over on time. It's God's kindness that leads us to a repentance. It's God's kindness that on a day like today, as his brother said, that we can have an eternal hope that we might be together again. A life built on the rock brings eternal stability in times of earthly instability, and it brings eternal peace with God for the forgiveness of our sins. And that should leave us with a much greater hope today as we say goodbye to Garrett, our loved one. That's all I have, other than just a quick reminder about the truck parade tomorrow. You can find information on Garrett's Facebook page about it. That'd be the easiest way. I'm sure you won't remember the address, but it's over here in Benjamin on 7300 South 2000 West at 1 p.m. is when we're meeting. If you get off the Benjamin exit, go west and take your first right, go past the Shooter's soccer facility, you'll run right into it. We would love for all to come who can make it. If you have a dump truck and if you know of other people who can come and join us, we'd love to honor Garrett with as many trucks as possible. Thank you.
do. Brought all these flowers, your black dresses and suits. Y'all know me, you know the truth. That ain't me in that box there in front of you. Can I just get it in? And y'all just get out of here. I got the best of you ever, now that I'm way up here. Joking around with Jesus, catching up with Grandpa. Hurry up, preacher, I'm telling y'all you should be fishing with a cold beer in your hand. Instead of missing me here, y'all should be missing me there, high up in your ear stand. Save my truck, save my guns, and when they're rolling up, give them to my sons. Don't let this stained glass shine on y'all too long today. Save the roses, save the roses. Don't waste a moment. I'll tell who you love, how much you love. Don't just say it now, you gotta show. And every chance you get to know her better. Remember forever, don't last forever. Take it from me in my brand new point of view. The biggest regret of your life won't be what you did, it'll be what you didn't do. You should be fishing with a cold beer in your hand. Instead of missing me here, y'all should be missing me there. High up in your ear stand. Save my truck, save my guns, and when they're rolling up, give them to my sons. Don't let this stained glass shine on y'all too long today. The time is so precious, it ain't gonna away. You should be fishing with a cold beer in your hand. Instead of missing me here, y'all should be missing me there. I'll over your dear stand. Save my truck, save my guns, and when they're rolling up, give them to my sons. Don't let this stained glass shine on y'all too long today. Save the roses, save the roses, save the roses. Don't waste them on me. Don't waste them on me.
I don't know who decided I should talk after that song. I just want to announce a little bit more before I start. The pallbearers today are brothers Todd and Dallas Hansen, sons Tyson and Xander Hansen, friends and co-workers Shadley, Blake Beal, Troy Christensen, Greg Christensen, and Preston Walden. I want to thank them for their service. Lisa asked me to say a few words on her behalf. She wrote, "To know Garrett Hansen is to love Garrett. He is kind and thoughtful and loving. Our situation was weird, to say the least. Through it all, he forgave me and loved me, and I him. We met at deer camp when I was 8 years old. He has been in my life from that moment on. As friends, to best friends, to husband and wife, to this weird, unconventional friendship that was so special and unique to only us. He is the father of my sweet Xander. He and I had this partnership and friendship that was supposed to last the rest of our lives. And it did, but it's ended too soon. I loved him so very much, and I know he loved me and Xander unconditionally. He was the sewer in the family. He fixed the buttons or zippers and patches. He was so proud to know how to do that. And I want you to know he didn't learn it from me. He learned it from his dad. He was always super happy to serve us. Xander said he misses him and wishes he was here. He was super happy that his big guy taught him how to shoot guns and to open knives safely, and he will miss the cooking. Dad was the best cook he knew. Hope you guys don't starve to death now. Yeah. This is probably the hardest thing that a mother needs to do ever in her life, is to bury her firstborn son. Garrett came into this life as a little thing. He only weighed 4.5 pounds. He was 18 inches long, and he fit right here in his dad's hand. He wasn't very big at all, but he was pretty strong from the beginning. We went home after only 5 days, and I don't know what that doctor was thinking when he sent this little tiny thing home with a teenage mother who didn't know how to take care of herself, let alone a baby. But we managed, we got along, and I was determined that I was going to do my best with this little guy. And so I held him and tended to him, and I didn't allow him to cry. And that was the worst thing I could have done. He needed to cry to strengthen his lungs a little bit. Well, when we realized that he needed to cry, we couldn't make him cry. And there was no way that I was going to pinch him or hurt him to make him cry. But we discovered that if I would put his feet over the furnace, it would bother him and he would start to cry. And so we did that. We didn't burn him. It wasn't even hardly warm, but he would cry over that. And so for several times a day, we would put his feet over and make him cry for a while, and then I'd cry with him. So Garrett never did cry much in his life, even though he had very tender feelings and a very soft heart. There were times that I could see that he was emotional about things and he would walk away from it. As a family, we moved to New Jersey when he was about 2 years old and Jana was about 5 months old. When it came time to potty train her, I didn't have to do one thing. He would escort her to the bathroom several times a day. And after she'd done her duty, he would pat her and say, "Oh, you're such a good little boy." Jana, I don't think that scarred you too bad through all of this. I felt like my kids got along pretty well. There wasn't a lot of contention in our home, but maybe I don't know everything that happened when I wasn't there. But because the four of them were so close in age, they always played together. And I couldn't keep track of whose friends were whose. And so I would often have to say, now, was he your friend or was he somebody else's friend? But it was always fun to have them in our yard. One day, Garrett came running into the house and he was just sweating and red-faced and he needed a drink of water. And so I said to him, "What have you been doing out there?" And he says, "We're digging a hole." I'm like, "What are you digging a hole for?" "Well, I don't know, but we are." Like, "Okay, well, where are you digging the hole?" "Well, in the vacant lot next door." "Okay." So one day a mother called me and she goes, "What are you guys doing at your house?" And I'm like, "Nothing, I don't know." And she says, "Well, my son just asked if he could come over and dig the hole." I'm like, "Oh yeah, my kids are digging a hole." I don't know why. That went on all summer long and it kept them busy. I was kind of happy about that. We had the yard that all the kids came to play in because there was room for football or wiffle ball or whatever you wanted. We were one of the first families that ever had a trampoline, and it was above ground for a while, and then we dug a hole and stuck it in the ground, and then there was a play set and a gazebo and all the kinds of things. So we were kind of the neighborhood house, and that was fun to see my kids playing with all of their friends. Salem Pond was close to our house, and they were not supposed to go there. But through the years, I have found out that they spent a lot of time there when I was told that they had gone someplace else. Garrett was pretty calm about everything. I never saw him get very upset. Not to say that he didn't do things that we didn't like. And he did get grounded sometimes. And he would just say, "Well, how long am I grounded?" And we'd say, "A week," or whatever it was. Okay. He would just stay grounded a week. I never had to say anything to him. He knew he was grounded. He just did what he was supposed to do that without any fussing. And then the second the grounding was over, he had kept track. He knew, and he was right back to doing the things he got grounded for. You know, it was hard and frustrating for a mother that this kid was not even upset when he was getting punished. So I didn't like that very well. He was independent. It drove me crazy that he would just up and go somewhere and I didn't know where he was. And he just could not imagine what was wrong with that because he knew where he was. And that's all that mattered. And he probably was at the pond. So there we go. When he entered kindergarten, they had a program for the mothers. And so I went down to be with him and he ran up to me and one of the teacher's helpers turned and said, "Oh, I'm sorry your mom couldn't come today. You brought your sister?" So he looked at her and he goes, "No, this is my mom." I was too young to have that child. I did too much. But then on the other end of it, when I went to Dallas's, they asked if he'd had to bring his grandma. So I don't know, both sides of things. Just go figure about that. He always loved sports, all kinds of sports, but especially he loved to play baseball. And he was too little to be on the team. We had gone and asked if he could be on. Nope, he was too young to do it. But if Gary would coach, then he could play. So Gary coached for quite a few years, and that's how Garrett was able to get his early start. And he always had good eye-hand coordination. He could always hit the ball, always hit it really hard. And that was a necessary thing to happen because he had really short legs and he could not run fast. So if he didn't hit it into the outfield, he was going to get out on first base. So that was a good thing. When he was born, the doctor said, "Now you really have to be careful of his head. As a preemie, it's quite fragile." And so I was always worried about that. And I always tried to protect him from that. So when he decided he needed to be the catcher on his ball team, I was kind of a wreck. I couldn't stand to see that bat so close to his head, but he was an excellent catcher and fearless about being right in there and doing the best job that he knew how to do. We didn't, because also of the head thing, we never let him play football, and he was plenty big enough to do that, but I don't think he ever really wanted to play because he didn't much like the contact sports, and he didn't have the killer instinct in him. He was too soft-hearted, and so when people would ask him why he wasn't playing, he'd say, "Well, my mom won't let me." But I think he was kind of happy that he didn't have to do that. Garrett was fun to have around. Some of his friends mentioned this last night. When he was old enough, he bought some tapes of stand-up comedians, and then he would mimic them to a T. And then we laughed harder at him mimicking them than we laughed at them. It was always more fun to see him talking about them. Of all my children, Garrett and Holly are probably the most adventurous. Jana was too shy and Todd was too young and Dallas hadn't been born yet. And I didn't know this at the time, but Holly and Garrett would sneak out in the middle of the night and ride their bikes to Spanish Fork. That was a pretty good jaunt in the middle of the night. And they said, "Well, it was okay, Mom. We were on the back roads." Okay, well, that sounded worse to me than the first roads. For some reason, one of the bikes broke, and so Holly rode on the handlebars over, and Garrett pumped her all the way over and all the way back. He had been duped, and she had a blast. He always said, "I was just the stupid one." And then for a while, we had a bike. It was side by side, and two people could pedal. And so they found out that McDonald's was open all night long in Payson. So they would pedal to Payson and then eat French fries all the way back home. And it's a good thing I didn't know that. They would have been grounded for life. So when the kids started to drive, we had a little red Pinto car, and it had a white stripe on it, and we called it the Coke can. And some well-meaning parents would tell us where they had seen the Coke can in the church parking lot doing donuts, and it could be anywhere in Spanish Fork or Salem. We also found out where that car was during school hours too. Sometimes we got upset, and sometimes we just let them do whatever they were going to do. One time when Garrett was in the Pinto, he had his sisters and brother with him. They hit a tree, and Gary's like, "Garrett, how could you hit a tree?" And he said, Dad, I was trying to miss the cat. And the other three, right at the same time, said, hit the cat. So we know the truth of that story. He got busted. He also had to pay for the tree. So he was so tiny when he was born that they whisked him off to the incubator really fast, and I didn't get a chance to hold him. So the first time that I held him, they had wrapped him in a receiving blanket that had stripes on it. And so from that time, I thought of him as my little tiger. And he fought like a tiger to live for that first little bit. It wasn't easy being that tiny and get going. We just about did lose him a couple of different times, but he struggled and made it through. He was also known as some other names. And so if you knew him during this time, you probably knew these names. He was G-Man or G or G-Rat. That's probably the most frequent one lately. Big G, Pepper or Pep, and Captain. So depending on what time of his life you knew him, you knew one of those nicknames. And his own name is kind of a nickname. So the first part of his name, Ger, is for Gary, and the last part of his name, Et, is for Jan Et, and so it's Garrett. So we named our kid after us. Garrett spent a good portion of his life being a single dad. It wasn't easy raising two children on his own. There were good people who helped out, but for the most part, he struggled through. When Kelsey was little, she painted his toenails. He has had painted toenails for a good portion of his life. And lately, Lisa has painted his fingernails. He loved the attention and the laughs when he watched people's faces as they looked at those nails. He was even described to the other workers as, oh, you know, the guy with the painted fingernails. So he had a blast with that. I admire his determination to raise his kids and did what he knew how to do to provide for them. It wasn't always perfect, but then life is never perfect. He felt the heavy responsibility of being a young single dad, and he also felt the excitement and a little bit lighter load of being an older father. A short time ago, he had mentioned that he had been at one of Xander's ball games, how much fun it was to watch, and how proud he was. Xander is so athletic, he said. The only bad thing is those coaches are not very good, and I need to teach him how to play the right way. Xander, I feel bad for you, and I don't think you realize what it'll be like to not have your dad around. But I hope you'll find some coaches and some mentors to help you to grow into the man that you're meant to be, and that you can become as good a man as your dad. Kelsey and Tyson, you've gone through a lot in your short lives, losing your mom and now your dad. I pray that you'll find some good friends. Surround yourself with people who will have your best interests in mind. I'm grateful for the Mother's Day that we just had. I had my 5 kids there. Garrett was in a fun mood, laughing and joking, reminiscing a bit as we divided out pictures and talked of the good old days. We took some new, not quite ready for Hollywood pictures, but I'm glad now that we did. It was the last time we were all together. To my kids, I know you didn't always visit each other daily, and your lives have taken on new responsibilities that kept you from being together as much. But I hurt for you now that this 5-piece set of children is now broken, and one of them is gone. I hope you can cherish the fond memories you have and laugh at the good times. As a mother, I think there are certain things that you know. In the back of my mind, I had a premonition all my life that I was going to lose him early. I don't know if it was from him being so small as a baby, but I always knew. I thought maybe it would happen when he had the heart problems a few years ago, but he made it through that. He got hit by a car once in front of our house, and he wasn't hurt bad. But I was worried then. I had to check his head to see if it was okay. That was always in the back of my mind. As he got older, he pitched on his softball team. And after getting, if you've ever played softball, you know that that pitcher's mound is pretty darn close to the batter's box. And he got hit a few times and decided that he couldn't play pitcher anymore because his reflexes weren't good enough to stop that ball. And especially after one time when he did get hit in the head and he started to play a different position. And then this fluke accident happened, and it was his head. When Todd told me that he had hit his head, I knew then. I knew. This was it. I have mixed emotions. I'm heartbroken over this loss, and especially for those out there who loved him. The struggles they will have trying to fill the void that he has left. I'm also jealous because now he gets to be with his dad and his grandparents. His job on this earth is finished. He passed the test. He fought a good fight, and he has won. Garrett passing as suddenly as he did has provided us with the perfect example of why we should be living, loving, and appreciating our lives. You never know. On the back of the program, there's a poem. It's entitled The Dash. It talks about on our headstones, there's the date of our birth, there's the date of our death, and there's the dash in between. The dates don't matter. The dash is what matters. What have you done with your life? Garrett lived his dash well. We'll be closing with the song, I'll Be There. So when you see the wind blowing and the leaves shaking, know that he will be there. It's interesting to note, the songs we have chosen today are not ones to praise or honor him. They are words that we would like for him to say to us. We don't want him to go. The closing prayer will be given by, first we'll have the song, I'll Be There. The closing prayer will be given by Greg Christensen, after which the interment will take place at the Salem City Cemetery, where Kyle Nelson, his cousin, will dedicate the grave. And then anyone who would like to is invited to the luncheon afterward. Take special note, this is a little bit weird. He will be riding on the back of a flatbed truck on the way to the cemetery, just the way he would love it to happen, with an escort. Yeah, Kelsey's telling me they're going to toot their horns. With an escort of some other trucks. We appreciate that. So I want to say to Gary, take care of our little boy. And Garrett, give your dad a great big hug. Until we meet again.
Over the mountains, over trees, over oceans, over seas, across the desert, I'll be there. Yellow whisper on the wind, Don't be afraid of my love. I'll be watching you from above. But I give all the world tonight to be with you. 'Cause I'm on your side. I see you care. The weight of time could have gone nowhere. Just think of me, and I'll be there. On the edge of a waking dream, over rivers, over streams, through wind and rain, I'll be there. Across the wide open sky, thousands of miles I fly to be with you. I'll be there. Don't be afraid, oh my love. I'll be watching you from above. And I give all the world tonight to be with you. 'Cause I'm on your side. I see you care. When we die, but I go nowhere. Just think of me, and I'll be there. Just think of me, I'll be there. In the breath of the wind that sighs, there's no need to cry. Just think of me, and I'll be there. Don't be afraid, oh my love. I'll be watching you from above. But I give all the world tonight to be with you. 'Cause I'm on your side, but I still care. We could die, but I'm nowhere. Just think of me, I'll be there. Just think of me, I'll be there.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful that we could all be gathered here today in honor of Garrett. And we're thankful for knowing him and having him in our lives. And we're we've been very blessed to have him for this short time. But please help us to find comfort and peace in his loss, and help us to remember all the joy and the laughter that he brought into our lives, and help us to share that with others and with each other, to always remember the good and the fun that he brought into our lives. And we're thankful for everything that he did that we don't really know and remember, but that he still did. And please help us to be grateful and love those around us. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
The congregation, please stand. Those who are pallbearers are going to have you follow directly behind the casket. The rest of the family will follow behind the casket.